The 49ers really seem to want Robert Saleh to be their defensive coordinator, but could Jerry Jones swoop in and steal him as a head coach? We'll talk about it on today's Gold Standard podcast. What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Standard podcast on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera here with a very special guest, someone that I have referred to as the most objective person that covers the Dallas Cowboys, my dear friend, RJ Ochoa from Blogging the Boys. How are you, RJ?
Statistics. Great to see you. Great to be with you. I hope your trip to the Lone Star State, not to dox you, was wonderful. And I hope you got to experience a proper ballpark, because I know you haven't to this point in your life.
It was a great trip to Houston I was on. I did check out Minute Maid, which is not Minute Maid Park anymore, but all the signs inside the stadium all say Minute Maid, so they haven't changed any of that. Even the tour guide didn't really know the new name of the stadium. So as usual, the Astros are right on top of things as an organization. I'm sure if it was about cheating, she would have been all over it. Anyway, let's talk football, shall we? Shall we talk about Robert Saleh? The Niners want him. They've only interviewed one other candidate besides him for their coordinator position, so they're not really hiding their intentions here. And I wasn't really too worried about Vegas or Jacksonville because those are jobs you take to get fired in 2 years. But Dallas is different. Jerry Jones doesn't like to fire coaches. He's very loyal. Dallas has a good roster, I think, with a lot more attractive pieces than anywhere else Robert Saleh is interviewing. How real is the Cowboys' interest in him?
I would only amend what you said in one small degree. You said that Jerry Jones is very loyal. I think that we, in this specific case, are covering the word cheap with loyal. He doesn't like to, move on from coaches because he doesn't like to pay buyouts. He doesn't like to pay people not to work for him. Which has kind of borne itself out, time after time after time after time. And that's a really important factor, I think, here as it relates to Robert Saleh. I think if you look at the most recent defensive coordinators for the Dallas Cowboys, Mike Zimmer is obviously the most recent. NFL Network's Jane Slater had, I think, the most apt term. She said he needs to do some soul searching. So we don't exactly know whether or not Zimmer is going to be coaching at all. He obviously was away for a few years before Dallas plucked him back out last year. And prior to that, it was Dan Quinn, obviously, for 3 years, and he parlayed that into incredible success. And while he took the Washington job, he did interview after each of his first 2 seasons with the Cowboys. So, I mean, it is a job and an opportunity that generally opens doors for you. And I could see Robert Saleh, if he doesn't get an opportunity that he likes this particular cycle, maybe looking at this in terms of the way that Dan Quinn did when he took the job in 2021. Kind of a similar situation. If you recall, he was fired, I think, after 5 games in Atlanta in 2020. I don't personally buy that the Cowboys are all too interested in Robert Saleh. There are people who go, intense with these types of things. And I understand that there's a history, related to this in a poor way. People assume that this interview, that interview are just to make teams Rooney Rule compliant. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm not going to levy that accusation here. Obviously, Robert Saleh is one of the 2 mandatory interviews that the Cowboys would have to obviously have in order to get Rooney Rule compliant. I think that they might view him as a defensive coordinator candidate. There's a lot to this. I just don't personally think that they want him to be their head coach. I think they want him as a part of the operation, potentially, just not in that chair.
Interesting. And what do you think of the 49ers' interest in Robert Saleh?
Well, Robert Saleh left San Francisco before they became the Cowboys' daddy. So I don't fear him the same way I do a lot of other people relative to the franchise. Like I don't hold that same level of distaste for him. I do think he probably doesn't get enough credit as, say, a DeMeco Ryans or a Steve Wilks, if anybody is giving Steve Wilks any credit. But I think that he was clearly he doesn't have the same kind of mark that Kyle Shanahan disciples tend to get, and doesn't have the same kind of flavor that they tend to get. I think Mike McDaniel has probably gotten the biggest bump out of being a Kyle Shanahan disciple. I know their matchups against one another have had that moniker. I think he's underrated, and I think a lot of that is probably because, having covered the Mike McCarthy era in totality now with the Cowboys, I told you this many times. I stand by the fact that he lost a very public PR battle to Aaron Rodgers, and that warped people's perception of him for a very long time. I think even still to this day. And I would imagine that such is the case for Robert Saleh. We forget he was very, very, very coveted. I know you remember in 2021 when he took the Jets job.
Yes, I do remember that. My worry is that the Niners are trying to, go back in time to 2019. Oh, we're going to get Robert Saleh back and everything's going to be good. No, you don't have a time machine. You don't have Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner and Nick Bosa and Dee Ford along that defensive front like you did in 2019. And my God, to say those names out loud, just stunning to me how good their defense used to be and is clearly not anymore. So I'm just worried that they're just trying to run it back. And it feels in a lot of ways like this team has been trying to get back to 2019 and to Super Bowl 54 ever since they lost it.
I mean, if you are curious for an independent party's, opinion on that, I think so. I know he ultimately lived up to it, but I think George Kittle's "I will be back here," whatever line it was, like that's kind of them. You have done an amazing job, I think, of holding the Niners accountable. They love to act like they have accomplished something since 2019, when I fully respect that there have been more accomplishments than, say, the Cowboys or a lot of other teams. But what have you done? Like you won the NFC twice. That's it. Like that's what we're freaking out about here. I mean, there's a team in the Niners division that in this stretch of time did win the Super Bowl and beat the Niners to do that. I mean, so there is a lot of chest puffing, I think, that happens relative to the Niners that may not necessarily be fair.
Daza0187 says the Niners have been on a 5-year revenge tour. Yeah, it's kind of sad, but true. And then Waltony101 just wants to come off the top rope. Is Jimmy G a free agent if we're running it back to 2019? I think he actually will be this year.
I mean, and that's not always the worst thing. Like I have gotten really mad at the Cowboys for trying to do things like that. Like there is some logic to that. I maybe the best example is Josh McDaniels with New England. That's a very unique thing, obviously. I don't know that Robert Saleh is that, but I do understand also, like, if you're a Niners fan, like, what's the other option? Like, but I also understand if you're Robert Saleh, like, do you really want to go work for Kyle Shanahan again? Not even that Kyle Shanahan's difficult to work with, but like it feels like you're putting a glass ceiling on yourself by going back there.
And let's say he goes back and he's awesome, which is what they're hoping. He's going to leave again because he clearly still wants to be a head coach. So then you're right back in this bucket one more time. Now, maybe they don't care because they figure if we win a Super Bowl, it'll be worth it. I don't know, but that is part of the discussion. I don't know how good Kyle Shanahan is to work for and with. They legendarily would have shouting matches during the week because they would disagree about stuff, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. I think it's kind of a creative tension that, frankly, I think Kyle Shanahan could use, because I think sometimes he needs to have somebody to push back on him. But it wasn't like it was all kumbaya, all the time. They were all buddy-buddy. It wasn't like that. Maybe they can just put it aside. I don't know. But, I don't know. I'm very hesitant to just say, once we get Robert Saleh, it'll all be good. I would like to see them build something new.
I agree with you. And that's why I don't know how thrilled I am about his prospects as the Dallas Cowboys head coach. I recognize that it's difficult to assess his overall body of work with the Jets. I was part of the group, if you recall, that bagged on him for the time prior to Aaron Rodgers, because we acted like, we can just throw those years away because he didn't have Aaron Rodgers when they mattered. I mean, they picked Zach Wilson. They wanted Zach Wilson, and it didn't work out, and he was a part of that. So I think ultimately what it will probably come down to is how he feels about San Francisco, because I do not think the Cowboys are interested in him as a head coach. I mean, right now, I'm very sad to say that everything I'm about to say is real in my mind. I think the Cowboys either want Kellen Moore, Deion Sanders, or Jason Witten to be their head coach, which is just the most unbelievable sentence that you could ever say out loud. Now, the Deion thing is its own monster in and of itself. But I think the ideal world for Dallas is bringing Kellen Moore in and having Robert Saleh be his kind of assistant head coach, macho man, muscle, defensive coordinator, and he can parlay that into a future head coaching opportunity, because he isn't kissed by the Joneses the way that Kellen Moore is, and therefore he doesn't have the benefit of all time the way anybody in their orbit seems to have.
All right, so put yourself in Robert Saleh's shoes then. Would you rather be the defensive coordinator in Dallas or the defensive coordinator in San Francisco?
I think I would maybe rather be the defensive coordinator in Dallas because, and not that I think the Cowboys are a better team than San Francisco. Again, I've been on record many times with you that San Francisco is their daddy. But the stage that comes with it, and if you do get some sort of lame duck in front of you, if it is Kellen Moore, not lame duck, but I mean some inferior person, some newbie, some raw person, if it's Jason Witten, God forbid, I think you're viewed. I mean, I guess the best way to put it is recall all the conversations you and I ever had about Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn. It was constantly Dan Quinn's running the show. Dan Quinn's the one. Everybody actually loves Dan Quinn. Mike McCarthy's just this puppet. He's just this figurehead, whatever. And if it's Kellen Moore or something, there's a big age difference. I think he's viewed a bit differently than McCarthy was. But it is a good thing to be the secondary guitar player with the Dallas Cowboys. If you're the front mid, if you're the lead singer, man, it is a tough go. It is a really difficult time to be Dak Prescott or Mike McCarthy or whoever holds those chairs at the moment. But it's a great time to be Micah Parsons or to be Dan Quinn, because while everybody has high expectations of you, all the faults, all the demerits, all the failures, they get put on everybody in front of you. And I think that, again, Dan Quinn deserved another opportunity to be a head coach, but the Cowboys defense got absolutely worked over the second half of the 2023 season. They got worked by Seattle. They got worked by Miami. They got worked by Buffalo. They obviously got worked by Green Bay in the playoff loss. And what happened? Dan Quinn got a job and a job from a team who wanted to do anything and everything to help and support him. And now he's the coaching of the divisional round. And I don't know that harmony exists in the same way relative to Robert Saleh and his interests if he were to go back and be the defensive coordinator for San Francisco, because it's the Kyle Shanahan show. No matter what you do, no matter how good you are, he's the genius. He gets all the credit. And some of that is his surly attitude. He kind of, paints the picture that way. So I think relative to future endeavors, the Cowboys are the better fit. Plus, you get to coach Micah Parsons, who is arguably the best defensive player in the NFL, and he will help you shine and he will help elevate you think about the two defensive coordinators Micah Parsons has had. Dan Quinn and Mike Zimmer. He has turned their names into more gold than they already were, and he can do the same thing for Robert Saleh.
Well, that was my question. Just once the Niners decided to demote Nick Sorensen and the disaster that he was, how attractive is the 49ers defensive coordinator job? Because the number one thing you have to evaluate with the job is who's my boss. That's number one. Number two is what are the expectations of this position? Well, your boss in this case is Kyle Shanahan, who doesn't seem super friendly to work with and super nice to work for. And number two, the expectations are sky high for Niners defensive coordinator, because people still think that this is the roster that DeMeco Ryans had when he was here, when they were really, really good. It's not, but no 49er fan seems to want to acknowledge that. So you're going to immediately be compared to one of the best bright young coaches in the sport who's going up against Patrick Mahomes this weekend. You don't have the roster. You have Nick Bosa, you have Fred Warner, and you have Diamador Lenore. And the rest of the stuff is just sort of there. It's nothing special. And that's the truth. And so that's what you have, but you're expected to deliver a top 5 defense. I mean, Steve Wilkes was 3rd overall in points allowed and got fired after going to the Super Bowl and holding Patrick Mahomes to 1 touchdown in regulation. So the expectations are sky high. I don't know that it's a great job.
I mean, I agree with you for all reasons considered. I think you never want to be the guy that replaces the guy. Mm-hmm. What you want to be is the guy who replaces the guy who replaced the guy. Like, I think you want to be Mike Vrabel more than you want to be Gerard Mayo, if that makes sense. If you don't want to replace Bill Belichick, you want to replace the dude who failed at replacing Bill Belichick because all the expectations have been lowered for you. Mm-hmm. And I think that Saleh left San Francisco right before the peak of talent kind of coalescing for San Francisco. And to me, I don't want to take anything away from DeMeco Ryans, but he clearly benefited from that. And he clearly rode the wave. And so Steve Wilkes comes in. All right, you're the guy who's replacing the guy. You didn't win the Super Bowl. You suck. You're a loser. Even though Kyle Shanahan did know the rules in overtime, you're the one who we're going to fire and we're going to get rid of. I know you love that storyline. And so now might be a softer time to come in that sense for San Francisco, but the talent is depleted now. It's not the same. I mean, they'll beat the crap out of the Cowboys, sure, but will they stack up against anybody else? Will they hold, I don't know, the Rams even? You like whoever you are, if you join San Francisco, you're not even the best defensive mind in your own division. Mike McDonald will coach circles around you. Like, I just don't know that the math works out for you relative, again, to your future goals and opportunities.
Interesting thought. Monkey Boy 12th says we want Saleh for his ability to adjust through a game. Sure, we don't have the same weapons when he was here last, but we need someone who can put guys in a position to succeed, which he did well. It's true, and Nick Sorensen was a complete disaster. Kyle Shanahan all but said it in his end of season press conference. We want a coordinator that has the knowledge, history, and ability to adjust throughout a game. And if you look statistically, the Niners defense got worse every single quarter of the game. In the fourth quarter, they were just an absolute train wreck. So, yeah, that's what the Niners need. My thing is, if they sit around and wait for Robert Saleh, they're going to be stuck holding the bag. They have only interviewed one other candidate. If Robert Saleh gets hired as a head coach, he's probably going to take someone else that the Niners would be interested for DC with him because they run the same system. And I feel like the Niners are putting all their eggs in the Saleh basket.
I also think, I mean, it's tough. And believe me, like if you want to, if you want a picture of an incompetent franchise in this process, look no further than mine. For anyone who's unaware, because the Cowboys dragged their feet on dismissing Mike McCarthy or whatever you want to call it, they missed their window of opportunity to interview any Detroit or Kansas City coordinators. So they literally now have to wait for those seasons to end, which is incredibly stupid and incredibly dumb and the bane of my existence. And for whatever reason, what I've been cursed with talking about professionally, a fortune that I'm very happy about, but also very upset with these days. And so I forgot where I was going with this, but I mean, my point is, if you wait, it can be disastrous. It can reflect very poorly on your decision making. And I think we're at the point now. Look, I'm not going to doubt Shanahan. I know that last year was not the best. I know that there are a lot of people who want him gone. I tell you, if right now I could snap my fingers and make him the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, I absolutely would. But I do think that if you're Kyle Shanahan, you've probably burned through your get out of jail free cards to this point relative to firing people. Like you can't bring back some dude and him be awful and expect everything to be the same anymore. Like at a certain point, this magic aura about you does go away, even if people are still buying it. And so Robert Saleh or whoever, that decision has to happen now. I mean, the Patriots already hired a brand new head coach. Like you're talking about, you could lose someone to Robert Saleh. You could lose someone to Mike Vrabel. You could lose someone to Mike McCarthy if he gets the Chicago job. Like soon enough, all these dominoes are going to start to fall.
And that's what I mean. You can't then say, oh, now I guess we have to set up interviews. Like, no, man, the music's going to stop and you're going to be left without a chair. But I was glad to hear you say that you would want Kyle Shanahan to be your head coach. The weird thing is, like, if he didn't fire Wilks, then he would have more leash. But you fired Wilks. It made it look like he was incompetent and you made a bad hire. Again, they were third in the league in points allowed that year with Steve Wilks. No team in the NFC allowed fewer points per game than the Niners that year, but somehow he was the problem.
It's funny that fate ultimately comes down to these handful of moments, right? Like if the coin flips the other way, you know what I mean? In whatever, like pick your moment from the Niners. And I don't mean to come in here and just pour salt in like all of the wounds, but like all these people could have like tenure for life. You know what I mean? It's a really thin margin for error, which again exemplifies why this is such an important decision for Kyle Shanahan this time around. I would not want this if I was Robert Saleh. Like I still hate the Cowboys, but I hated everything about this past season. And you and I talked about this a lot, obviously, on your show and obviously just kind of personally back and forth. It was in no way any kind of fun. And I know that sounds like a thing to just whine about, but covering the team, talking about them every day, it was exhausting. It was just the most heavy feeling ever that is still plaguing them. That being said, and I'm not bummed about this, that's what the Niners kind of feel like right now. Like who can it even be? Even if Robert Saleh does come back, is it like, boom, everything's good. Everyone get your varsity jackets out again. We're reliving the glory days. We're going out and getting tacos, tonight. Like, no, like it does feel really like just, like you're stuck in mud right now. And I don't know that Robert Saleh or anybody fixes that.
And it's like the glory days of what? Again, they didn't win the Super Bowl in 2019.
Don't tell Deebo Samuel, because he said that they were the real dynasty, dude.
There is no glory to relive. They are in their minds, they're the uncrowned champion. But in everybody else's mind, they're just second best. That's what they are. There's no talking around that. And again, I'm not one of these guys that says that they didn't do anything and our standard is championship, so nothing Kyle Shanahan has done is good. No, I'm not that. But they didn't win. And they have acted like they have won. And it's part of the reason I think that they continue to lose because you need to change, you need to evolve, you need to adapt. And that's why I wanted to see them interview a bunch of guys for DC. Get different people's opinion. Learn about what the rest of the league thinks about your roster and what they can do. You don't have to be married to this wide-eyed scheme where you have to get pressure with 4 and leave 7 in coverage and never blitz and never disguise anything. And so this Saleh just feels like a refusal to self-scout.
I mean, there are some similarities here with the Cowboys, and I think that that's probably true relative to the entire NFL. If you recall, when you and I first met in 2020, the Cowboys had just hired Mike McCarthy, and I was so pumped because it was like, finally, we're free of Jason Garrett. Like they get to do a coaching search. Like we get to, explore all these things. Do you know off the top of your head how many candidates they interviewed? It's a head coach, not a defensive coordinator, but do you know?
No, I don't.
What would be a pathetic guess?
2?
It was 2. They interviewed Marvin Lewis, who satisfied the Rooney Rule. At the time, you only had to interview one person, and then Mike McCarthy, and hired him. And it was like, this is it. Like, Jason Garrett's been your coach for a decade, and you talked to 2 guys, and one of which seems like it was just to satisfy the rule. And all of a sudden, you found your answer. It was so unsettling. And look, I stand by all the advocating I've done for Mike McCarthy in the past. But that being said, like, beyond the fact that you should be talking to other people if you're Kyle Shanahan, dude, he hasn't worked anywhere else except for this one place since he was here. Like, what, you want him back because it was really cool in 2019 was 5 years ago. Like, do you know how long the same, I love to look at time this way. The same difference of time between 2019 and now is equal to Russell Wilson and the Seahawks winning the Super Bowl in 2019. Like, that's how long ago it was. Like, you can't just be like, oh, it was super cool that time. Kyler Murray was the reigning #1 overall pick in 2019. Like, it was that long ago. And just because it was cool back then and you don't really have any other options right now, or you're too lazy to go out and find some other options, doesn't mean it's a good idea.
You're right. Half a decade is a lifetime.
It's over half a decade, 6 years.
Yeah, they're dog years for sure. Brett Davis, YouTube channel member, says, I want Lou Anarumo. His defenses gave Mahomes and Allen fits. He also gave Kyle Shanahan fits when they played too. At least interview him. At least interview him. That's my thing. You can still hire Robert Saleh, but bring in, and maybe they have, and somehow they're keeping it on the down low. I don't know. I hope that's the case, but it really doesn't seem like it. And that's the very, very frustrating thing. Now, the other reason I wanted to have you on, RJ, is because I feel like you are like in the timeline, you are like 3 years ahead of where we are now, because obviously for the 49ers, it's all about Brock Purdy, right? Brock Purdy and his contract, is it going to get done? And does he deserve $60 million a year and all of that stuff? Well, you have experience in this area because your quarterback, Dak Prescott, did not sign a contract until like hours before the first game. And it was a market rate contract. Hooray, Dak Prescott. He gets the bag. And so now you have had to live in the post-giant quarterback contract world. What is that like? What are we facing, assuming the Niners do re-sign Brock Purdy?
I would say that if you are a fan of the 49ers, whether you are pro Brock, anti Brock, and I imagine that there is that discourse because of the way this past season went, it is the best thing for the sake of your team to get this done as soon as possible. Absolutely as soon as possible. These are words that we cautioned for the Dallas Cowboys, not once, but twice. Twice they made this mistake with Dak Prescott. In fact, 3 times, if you want to be specific about it, because they franchise tagged him once. And so they went down to that wire and then he got hurt. And Dak Prescott, to trace this back to its origins, as far as it relates to Dak, and I think this is instructive and helpful. Dak's final year of his rookie deal was the aforementioned 2019 season. They didn't get a deal done ahead of that. And Dak was, like Brock, not a first-round draft pick, so he didn't have that 5th-year option. So 2019 comes. At that moment in time, the Cowboys watched the Rams extend Jared Goff and the Eagles extend Carson Wentz. And what'd they do? A whole bunch of nothing. 2020 comes, and Dak did, for the record, kind of threaten to potentially hold out. However, COVID happened, and there were virtual OTAs and all those things, so he didn't really get that chance. But still, they don't do anything. They don't get anything done. They have to place the franchise tag on him. Mike McCarthy's first year, guess what? He shatters his ankle into a billion pieces in week 5, and guess what happened? They waited all through the spring in 2021 and got the deal done right before the franchise tag deadline before you have to do it and you can't talk again, blah, blah, blah. He shattered his ankle and still then in 2021 got a market-setting deal. You would think that they would have said, okay, you know what? We really messed up. Like this was historically embarrassing for us. We're not going to make this mistake in the future. They did not. Fast forward after 2022, Dak throws 1 million interceptions. The 49ers kick their ass in the playoffs for the second year in a row. They could have come to the negotiating table with him then. They could have said, hey, dude, you had a down year, but we believe in you. Let's get this extension done now. Nope, nothing. 2023, Dak finishes second in MVP voting. You would think that they would say, okay, we got to swallow our pride. Let's get this done as soon as we can. And we can, after we do the extension, create some salary cap space, go out and be active in free agency. No, to your point, they drew it out until literally the day that the season began. He was coming off of his best individual season. He has gotten a similar deal, market-setting deal, coming off of missing 11 games. At the time, it was a 16-game regular season. It does not matter. This is a pass-fail proposition. Are you a franchise quarterback? Are you not? Yes, Brock Purdy is. I don't care where you rank him. I don't care how much you whine, how much you moan, how much you groan, how much you complain. He has passed that test. Oh, but it's $60 million. I don't care. Tomorrow, it will be $62 million. Next week, it will be $64 million. When the Cowboys should have gotten the extension done with Dak Prescott, like I talked about after the 2022 season, that was when Jalen Hurts got his deal with Philadelphia. And those losers over there, as much as I hate them, they're very smart. And because they got that deal done for $51.5 million. And when the Cowboys finally got it done with Dak, it was $60 million per year. You will not win. Nobody does. The house is undefeated here. The percentage of the salary cap is the same. So get over yourself. It's not your money anyway.
Interesting. Okay, there's a lot there to react to because I have come down firmly on the do not pay Brock Purdy side of things. Brock has said he wants a new deal by phase 1 of OTAs. And he didn't really say if he would show up without a new deal. He said, I don't know, which I think is probably as close to Brock is going to publicly come to saying, hey, I'm going to hold out if you don't pay me my money. That's not really his sort of philosophy. But it's interesting to hear you say that because I think a lot of people look at Dak Prescott and say, like, how could they pay that guy? That was a mistake. They should never have done it. So you sound like you were on the pay Dak train and you're on the pay Purdy train.
So I mentioned that ahead of 2019, the Eagles and Rams got their deals done with Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, respectively. Obviously, a lot has happened in the 6 years since then, as we discussed relative to the Niners. But do you know what happened to the Rams with Jared Goff or the Eagles with Carson Wentz after it was proven that they were not viable franchise quarterbacks for them? They thought their way out of it. They moved on. The Rams traded Jared Goff a bit more creatively, I'll admit, to the Detroit Lions and obviously got Matthew Stafford and parlayed it into a Super Bowl, including beating the Niners in the process. The Eagles, oh no, how are you going to get rid of Carson Wentz? He's terrible. He stinks. They found a buyer. They found someone to take Carson Wentz coming off of that disastrous, toxic 2020 season and ultimately benefited from it. You cannot be afraid of it. If you trust your front office, if you trust your general manager, they will be able to figure out a way. And even if you can't, even if no one will bite, even if they are truly that embarrassing, you can be as bad as somebody who my friend Rob Stats Guerrero once pissed off by way of an interview in Russell Wilson and have the Denver Broncos cut you and take on the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history and make the playoffs the very year that they are doing that. Did the Broncos win the Super Bowl this year? No. Obviously not. Were they doomed forever and in salary cap hell because of the massive mistake decision they made with Russell Wilson? Also no, because they have a front office and a coaching staff that was able to put their big boy pants on and figure crap out. And so if you think that the Niners can just move on and draft another player, great, be my guest. But you guys mortgaged the farm for this thing that I dealt with this last 2 years and Trey Lance, and that didn't work out for you either. So pay Brock Purdy, deal with it, be cool, and understand that the world will not end.
Actually, if anything, Lance underscores exactly what you're talking about. They gave up 3 first-round picks for him, and they made at least the NFC Championship game every year he was there, and he only started 4 games. So it's kind of proof of what you're saying, proof of concept.
it's absurd to be afraid of it, and that's the problem. It's truly fear, or in the case of my team, just overall incompetence. It's fear of not being able to understand everything that's happening to, for, and through the situation. You have to square that the next guy gets paid a little bit more than the last. Oh, but Patrick Mahomes has 3 titles, maybe 4 titles. So what? Is he next? No. I mean, it's good to be a quarterback in the NFL. It's a prosperous life financially for quarterbacks. There are 32 of them, and if you play well, it works out very well for you. And Brock Purdy has done that. We can sit here, we can quibble, we can argue, well, he's got endorsements and he makes all this money because he's the Niners quarterback. So what? The rules are the same. If you're the next guy, you get a little bit more. That's the way this game goes.
You're kind of making me, at least, I'm not saying you're converting me, but I think you're making me feel better about the Niners.
Well, I haven't thought about this deeply because I'm done with this for a little while. Who else is up for a deal this year?
Nobody really, because the 2022 class was so bad.
Oh, the 21 class, the Zach Wilson trade. Yeah. But still, I mean, it could be the time for extensions to happen, and there will be things like that happening. The market rate, you will always lose. Always at the money 5 positions, there will not be a single player out there. Like Micah Parsons wants to say, like, oh yeah, he came out and said, I don't need $40 million a year or whatever. And I think that's cool that Micah said it, but Micah, dude, the market at your position is like 30. So you saying you don't need 40 isn't exactly being generous at this point in time. If you're a quarterback, pass rusher, corner, left tackle, star wide receiver, the market is your friend. And Brock Purdy, if he is smart, if he is wise, will absolutely use that to his advantage. Now, could the 49ers roll the dice and say, we trust Kyle Shanahan, this dude who you and I spent the first 20 minutes kind of trashing a little bit? Sure, they could. You want to trade for Kirk Cousins? Go ahead. But I promise you, the lesser of all evils, just from a thought process standpoint, is just paying Brock Purdy. And it is so simple. It is just, well, here's the Dak deal. We're going to adjust for inflation, and there you go. Sign it, and we'll all be on our happy, merry way.
That's the thing that I've said. If you have decided that Brock is your guy and he's worth the money, then get it done immediately. You can get it done today. Literally, as we are speaking, they can announce a deal. They don't have to wait till the new league year or any of that. They got Jimmy Garoppolo's deal done. I think it was 39 days after the regular season ended. His deal was signed, sealed, delivered by February. So
I thought they got, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they give Jimmy a deal right after trading for him initially?
No. Okay. It was in February after
but still, he had started 6 games or whatever it was at the time. Okay, my point is that was dumb on some level, but it was smart.
Yeah.
Why do you have Brock Purdy on your team unless you expect him to be very good, right? Not paying him is betting against yourself, the way the Cowboys did. By not paying Dak Prescott, they were like, oh, well, if you suck, then we don't have to pay. Well, if he sucks, then you suck. You know what I mean? It's the dumbest, thing that a front office can come up with and think. Almost as silly, and excuse me for using one of your commenters to make this point. Great one 765. Trade Purdy and get picks. Great one 765. Thank you for being a supporter of the Gold Standard 49ers Podcast Network. I love you for that. This is ridiculous. I mean, what on earth? Who out there do you think is willing to pay the money that you're not willing to pay and give up significant draft compensation in order to do that? You don't think Brock Purdy is good enough to pay yourself, but you think he's good enough to fetch 3 first-round draft picks. This juxtaposition doesn't make sense. This is an oxymoron living in and of itself.
It's a fair point, and I don't honestly know. I think Brock probably has more value to the 49ers than he does to other teams because he does have some physical limitations that I think the Niners are able to compensate for better than some other teams. I'm sorry, Stats, but I've dealt with this subject a lot. So you really opened some wounds for me. So another one from Ross Johnson here says, LOL. So guys like Baker don't exist. You're right, Ross Johnson. Great initials, strong initials, if I do say so myself. But that being said, you're right. The Buccaneers probably feel very good about themselves because Baker Mayfield exists. Look how smart they are. They found Baker Mayfield right after Tom Brady. They're geniuses. You know who else took a chance on Baker Mayfield? The Cleveland Browns. They didn't feel like that was satisfactory. You know who else got him for pennies on the dollar? The Carolina Panthers. They didn't feel like Baker Mayfield was worth anything. You know who else thought he might be worth something? And he was for that one random Thursday night game? The Los Angeles Rams. Baker Mayfield was trash
For some teams, it took a number of variables lining up. And just because you pay Brock Purdy doesn't mean, oh, all the work is done. You have to continue to build a team. And the Niners have shown and demonstrated that they can do that. But yes, Baker Mayfield does exist. But let's not act that just because he's a success in Tampa Bay, that he wasn't a failure in multiple other organizations beforehand.
This is the thing that I have said, though, because a lot of people have said, hey, if he takes the Baker deal, then you should be thrilled with that, which I don't think he would ever do. But my thing is, like, the Buccaneers were never and will never be a threat to win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. They're good enough to do exactly what they did this year, get into the playoffs and lose. That's what Baker is. He can make some great plays, but let's be honest, we know what Baker Mayfield is. And so is that the guy that I want my team to have at quarterback? No. And I don't mean to disrespect Baker Mayfield. He's not a bad quarterback, but I want my team to have one of those crazy elite guys. And I get it. They're super hard to find. I totally get that. I still want it, though.
Of course you do. And if you want Baker Mayfield, cool. Then don't pay Brock and sign or trade for Kirk Cousins. Like, think about, even if you're in on the Kirk Cousins thing, say you are that deep of a Kyle Shanahan disciple. You're like, oh, Shanahan's wanted him forever. It will totally work. Okay. Beyond the fact that he was not very good over the second half of last season, beyond the fact that he's still kind of coming off of injury, beyond the fact that he's a little bit older now as far as the position is concerned, you have to give up assets to get him. You know what I mean? Like, nothing is free. Like, everything requires some sort of price. And what are you going to do with Brock? I mean, you are fortunate, by the way, if Brock isn't a jerk about this, because he could be. And I maintain that Dak Prescott could have been. Dak showed up last year to OTAs, to minicamp, to training camp. He did the whole thing. Now, CeeDee Lamb didn't. He went the other route, and I don't have any issue with that. But this could get messy. I mean, Brock has watched, you have made sure that everyone, smartly so, I should add, got paid, got their bag. And beyond the fact that you've been a smart front office that way, you were also kind of dumb in that you let a lot of other players demonstrate some leverage against you. Brock has watched Trent Williams, Nick Bosa. I can't recall if Christian McCaffrey held out to some degree.
He missed one day of like voluntary camp, and then they immediately got it done.
But for sure, Nick Bosa and Trent Williams involved. I don't know if there was another holdout. Excuse me.
Ayuk, Debo.
Oh, obviously Brandon Ayuk, and Debo Samuel. You think that Brock Purdy just watched all of those things literally work out exactly the way the players wanted and isn't sitting there going, oh, well, I'll just do that because they got what they wanted.
And I'll have even more leverage because I'm a quarterback. And so me not being there screws up everybody else.
Yeah. And I'm not only am I a quarterback, I'm a quarterback, and the heat's kind of up on Kyle Shanahan. The heat's kind of up on John Lynch. Like, the person most likely to be around 5 years from now, arguably, is Brock Purdy of that triumvirate, just based off of age and time served relative to the organization. I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but I think you get my point.
I'm just going to throw this clip up here. This is KMBR. 3 years ago today, the Niners went to Dallas and knocked off the Cowboys in the wild card round. Get down a little quicker next time, Dak.
That did happen 3 years ago, obviously today. So that was the 2021 season. And again, if you want to talk about like the quarterback's performance, the Cowboys went to the playoffs the next 2 years. They got their ass kicked by the Niners a year after that. I don't know when the 1 year anniversary of that is. I imagine this coming weekend because it was the divisional round. But I mean, they paid Dak this year. It was literally the year in question that you're looking at. It was 2021, and it's been 4 years. And they went to the playoffs in 2021. They went to the playoffs in 2022. They went to the playoffs in 2023, and he got hurt this past year. Oh, well, Dak sucks. He can't get it done in the playoffs. He's lost 2 of his 3 playoff games to the team that you all are telling me in the comments here is badass and the best in the NFL. So you can't have it both ways. I mean, it is okay to pay your quarterback. The world will not end. You will survive. And again, it's not your money. What are you going to do with the money anyway? I mean, like, what are you going to go out and get if it's not going to be Brock Purdy?
Yeah, it's not like there's a huge free agent prize just sitting there. Ross Johnson says, I'm tired of people saying it's not your money because a lot of it is. We pay for memorabilia, TV subscriptions, tickets, etc. So get your facts straight. Well, Ross, do you know how much 49ers memorabilia you would have to buy to pay for Brock Purdy's contract? The money comes from the owners, and the owners' money comes primarily from the TV deals. That's where the TV deals, once they sign those TV deals, because of the salary cap, the owner's profit is locked in. Even if they don't sell a single ticket, they're still making money. It's the owner's money.
Again, Ross, it's very nice of you to support your favorite team, truly. And I hope you support your favorite team's content creators, like Stats and the talented team here at the Gold Standard Network. I think my point is understood, that it's not debating, oh, well, if the Niners sign Brock Purdy to this extension, I have to go buy 50 more jerseys. I'm sorry. Like, that's just the result of making this deal. It has no bearing on your life. It is a matter of whether or not the Niners trust themselves to be able to think their way out of that box. I don't trust the Cowboys to be able to do that, but I do feel like Dak Prescott had earned his deal multiple times over. And again, what I'm advocating for here is actually anti-Brock Purdy. I'm saying get this deal done as soon as possible because it will be as cheap as possible. If you let Brock Purdy wait and play it out and let him get to free agency, it will cost you 10 times more. And if you don't believe me, consider that Russell Wilson got a job last year. Consider what the Cleveland Browns gave up for Deshaun Watson, including like what he was as a human being. When you are in quarterback purgatory, you will do anything, including selling your soul, to have a chance at the most important position in the game. And the same way you said, Stats, that Brock maybe means more to the Niners than he does to anyone else. Well, the Niners mean more to Brock. I mean, like, that relationship goes both ways. Like, Brock knows how to operate the machine in a way that not just anybody else would necessarily be able to, which is exemplified by Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance and, I don't know, Sam Darnold to some degree. I mean, like, a billion other people have tried and failed relative to the success that Brock has had.
I agree with that.
And I'm sorry. But if the team is so good and Brock is just a benefactor of it all, then why was the front office so incompetent with getting deals done for Debo, for Brandon Ayuk, for Trent Williams, for Nick Bosa? If it was a matter of, man, all these other guys are really carrying Brock, then why didn't you take care of them? Why didn't you make sure? Well, I mean, the quarterback sucks. So, like, it's really just everybody else that's doing everything. Why weren't you ahead of the market on those deals then? Because you weren't. You dragged your feet, you waited, and you lost, more importantly. So learn your lesson from Brandon Ayuk. Learn your lesson from all these situations. Swallow your pride, get it done, and move on like an adult.
There is no reason to drag it out. Like you said, the Niners have caved every single time, and all they've done is cost themselves money every single time. Waltony 101 on Twitch, shout out to the Twitch fam, says, this is a great Purdy therapy session for you, Stats. It kind of is. You're making me feel a lot better about it because I have been firmly in the no pay Purdy camp. But now, at least if the deal came out, I would be like, all right, RJ, talk me through it.
Again, name me the team that did it that was like doomed forever. That just was stuck financially, that couldn't get anything done whatsoever. The three worst examples of quarterback money or quarterback market-setting contracts getting done are the Rams with Jared Goff, the Eagles with Carson Wentz, and the Broncos with Russell Wilson, which they didn't have to do, by the way. Everybody kills these teams because those things didn't work out. But because they did them as soon as they conceivably could, they bought themselves an earlier exit window. The earlier you get this deal done, the earlier you can get out if things are ultimately disastrous. There are one-offs like the Deshaun Watson deal if you fully guarantee a massive contract. I don't think that would be the case, obviously, here because it hasn't been since.
I would argue that people would say the Browns is like the worst quarterback contract of all time. And I think people would say your Dallas Cowboys. They would say you paid Dak Prescott and you did nothing in free agency. Like literally, it was Ezekiel Elliott and Eric Kendricks, and that's it.
But that's not on Dak or Dak's deal because they could have done that. They could have very easily, and we chronicled this for like 6 months on end every single day. They could have done anything that they wanted to in free agency. If you don't know, I know you do, but any of your audience, for the sake of the context of this conversation, the Cowboys are notorious for not being active in free agency. They haven't spent big in free agency since signing Brandon Carr in 2012. So we're talking about 13 years ago at this point in time. So the Dak Prescott thing had nothing to do with that. And the Dak Prescott thing is an example of them weaponizing being cheap. They have franchise tagged and dragged out multiple players. They did it with Des Bryant. They did it with DeMarcus Lawrence. They've obviously done it with Dak Prescott 2 times over. They were flirting with doing it with CeeDee Lamb. We'll see if they do. If they don't get the deal done with Micah Parsons by March, like, what are you waiting for? Even like, is Micah Parsons somebody who you're doubting, paying long-term, being a part of your franchise long-term? And to that overall point, Micah was first eligible for an extension last year, and they didn't get ahead of it. They didn't learn their lesson while making the mistake with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb in the process. And so the Dak deal, I don't think, is a good example of hamstringing them in free agency because we advocated for it specifically because by extending Dak Prescott in March of last year, today, like you're talking a year ago, you could have alleviated all the more salary cap space relative to his current deal at the time. That isn't necessarily apples to apples for Brock because his current contract is so fractionally small compared to what Dak was on. But the point was, you get this deal done as soon as you possibly can because A, the price is lower than it will ever be, and because you can start to move money around so that you can be active in free agency. Their inactivity was not on Dak. It's on them being fools.
This is why you need to follow the work of RJ Ochoa. You can find him on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, at RJ Ochoa. Read everything he has to say at the Blog on the Boys website, blogontheboys.com. There's a YouTube channel as well, which is top notch, and which I want to thank you for, because you taught me a lot about YouTube and how to use it and why I should be on it. RJ is a big mentor to me. I was happy at the Super Bowl when I saw you, unlike my co-host Levin Black, who would not give me a hug. You actually did give me a hug at the Super Bowl in Vegas.
Yeah, Levin is my least favorite person, a part of the Gold Standard Network, if I'm being honest. So just so we're clear, for that specific reason, if I may be selfish and ask one question about the Cowboys before I go, because I'm in, like, I equated this to, you've seen Multiverse of Madness, I imagine.
Yes.
You know, when he's like walking through all the different timelines or whatever, like in a blitz sequence, and he winds up in one where he's like a shape, you know what I mean? Like everything looks like origami.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like to be a Dallas Cowboys fan right now. Like, and so like, I just feel so stuck and so broken and so hopeless. And so I ask you, of all the names that you've seen percolating, who is the hire that would scare you the most or make you laugh the least? You know, that if the Cowboys hired that person to be the head coach, you'd be like, maybe, because I don't know that there's one out there that you're like, oh crap.
Of the names I have heard them interested in, there is nobody. Like, if Jason Witten becomes the head coach of your team, I mean, I don't know what you do. That's like one step worse than Jeff Saturday becoming head coach of the Colts after sitting on the set of NFL Live for 2 years or whatever it was. The only thing, I mean, is it possible then that they could go after Ben Johnson? Like, let's say the Lions lose, right? Could they bring, if Ben Johnson went to Dallas, that would make me a little nervous.
I mean, it would excite me, but Ben Johnson's going to want the bag, right? Like, and he has every reason to ask for it the same way Brock Purdy does. And so the Cowboys are going to be like, you want more than minimum wage? Are you serious? You know what I mean? Like, so it feels so impossible, which is why, like, we're not even really entertaining that idea because it isn't believable.
GZDR Forever on Twitch says, if you were Jerry Jones, do you give any of the college coaches a shot? Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, Deion Sanders.
Sark has gotten some pop, obviously, you know, being a local name relative to the Cowboys, although he lost a big time game in AT&T Stadium. I suppose that makes him qualified for the job. Deion is apparently a real thing. This is where I'm at, Stats, and this is my therapy session. I am so down bad, so multiverse of madness, trapezoid shaped, that I'm in on the Deion thing. Like, that is truly what I want the most, partly from the perspective of, I just want to have fun at this point. Like, you've ruined any expectation I could have of actually winning the Super Bowl. So let me just enjoy this at the very least, however I possibly can. The other element is, you have tried this way for a very, very, very long time and failed in the most unbelievable manner, time after time after time again. You have built kingdoms in San Francisco and Green Bay and Philadelphia with your incompetence. Maybe it works. I mean, the Deion thing already has more proof of concept than I think anybody would have ever thought, you know, relative to when it all began. Again, I'm not banking on it happening, but I can't say it's impossible. And he would command a lot more respect than Jason Witten or Kellen Moore or whoever in a locker room, and would maybe be somebody who could challenge them on these archaic, stupid, incompetent ways of thinking.
I saw one of those aggregation accounts on Twitter say that Deion wants to come and that he wants the Cowboys to get rid of Dak and, of course, draft his son. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the Prescott contract. Is that even remotely possible?
It's literally over $100 million in dead cap if they traded him this year. Like, so again, it's not a practical thing. Like, and again, that's also part of the why you want to get the quarterback contract done as soon as possible. You want as much room for error as you can possibly establish.
The Sentinels football channel says Deion Sanders to the Cowboys would be perfect. Get me Deion. He may be a good head coach. I don't know. But the thing that you talked about that you liked with McCarthy in Dallas is, like, he kind of tried to keep the main thing with football. With Deion, like, he loves the show. He loves the lights. So then you get that together with Jerry, and it's like this thing could go up to 11.
The way I view it is, I don't think you're a wrestling fan. Like, we've never really discussed this.
I used to be.
Okay, well, I didn't know that. I wasn't, and really am not. But I watched the Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix a couple months ago, and I watched the first Raw on Netflix just because I was like, whatever. And when I was watching the documentary, I know it's obviously, profiling Vince McMahon, but I was just like, this is kind of cool. Like this whole wrestling thing, like I could see people being into this. And that's kind of how I feel like, give me the cage match. Put the briefcase up high, get the ladders, like fine. Like light it on fire. You know what I mean? Get some piranhas around here. Like, let's just do it. Let's just live large. I mean, like, it's kind of how I feel. So I tried to make it about football and failed, and have learned or had it beaten into me that it's never going to be any way other than this. I mean, for crying out loud, Jason Witten is a serious candidate for this thing. So, I mean, like I said, we might as well have a good Royal Rumble. That's how I feel.
Ooh, embrace the show. Speaking of the Royal Rumble, by the way, I don't know if you saw Kay Adams threw out the question, which NFL GM would win the Royal Rumble?
So I'm new to this. As I understand, a Royal Rumble is literally like just a billion people in the ring. Is that correct?
No, that's a battle royal. Royal Rumble is one at a time.
So it's kind of like you have to beat everyone in succession, right?
Yeah, well, you have to throw everybody over the top rope, and their feet have to hit the floor, and then they're out.
But it's one-on-one battles happening, and so like one guy survives, and then.
Well, no, you start with like few people in the ring, and then every like 5 minutes, a new person comes in.
That's what. So it is a billion people in the ring. That's what I asked, and you said
not all at the same time. A battle royal is when
there's multiple people fighting though simultaneously. So somebody has to be able to conceivably take on multiple people.
In theory.
I mean, who are we to doubt Howie Roseman at this point? You know what I mean? Like, dude's a wizard. I'm really.
Yeah. Somebody was saying Poles is a really big guy, so that could definitely be an option. I think that Trent Baalke, we talked about this on our Tuesday show. Trent Baalke is the kind of guy that would like hide under the ring until it was almost over and then come back out and sneakily throw a guy over the top, since he somehow manages to continue to keep his job despite multiple coaches failing.
See, like, I kind of feel that way about Howie. Like, everyone would be going for Ryan Poles because he's so big. You know what I'm saying? Like, he'd be too big of a target early on. Howie would survive and be crafty and then, convince like 3 other GMs, like, let's get after Poles, man. You know what I mean? And then it would all work out.
I think that the Lions would name Dan Campbell GM. He would come down the ring with the new contract in his hand that says he's the GM.
Oh, what a great twist. I can't believe you didn't cape for John Lynch.
He's up there. He's definitely a contender. Like, he's got good odds. He supposedly has this alter ego, 47 Red, where he just goes absolutely nuts. So maybe that would come out. But, I mean, Dan Campbell against John. Dan Campbell's huge if he pulled that maneuver.
Yeah. Well, if we're doing head coaches and Deion is the Cowboys head coach, I'm signing. I'm backing him. But if it's Jason Witten and if it's Kellen Moore, there's no way.
Deion, he doesn't have the mobility that he once had. He's down a couple toes.
I know, but again, the guy coached a Heisman Trophy winner. Like, that was impossible as far as I was concerned. So I'm not going to bet against it.
Well, we will see how it all plays out. Again, check out RJ's work at bloggingtheboys.com, the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel at RJ Ochoa. Are you on Blue Sky?
I am. I don't know the name thing. Like, it's, if you search RJ Ochoa, that's what it is. So I don't know. I know that there's like it's complicated.
Just search RJ Ochoa.
Also, I told you before you started, I don't like RIP TikTok if it's really the end. So
yeah, we're on TikTok, but I guess it won't matter. But anyway, thank you so much for the time. It's always good to pod with you again. I want to get our NFL show up and running again. We still need to figure out a way to work that out. Maybe that could be our off-season goal.
If it isn't, then something terrible happened, like the Cowboys existing.
Waltony 101 says, here's hoping RJ is next on doing a Niners-Cowboys playoff game preview.
They don't play next year.
I know. It's a playoff game.
Oh, I missed the word playoff. That's me. That's my bad.
I think that he wants that, just given the history of those two teams in the playoffs. Ooh, we got a super chat right at the buzzer. The Unfaithful Perspective, thank you so much, says, perhaps the Cowboys fan can relate to this too. Perhaps Saleh is the right choice for DC, but I'm just need some new changes. Bored with the 49ers.
That's exactly how I feel if the Cowboys hire Kellen Moore and certainly Jason Witten. It's like, we've done this, man. Like,
yep.
Oh man, the the guy said something stupid and the girl ran out. I wonder if they'll make up, in a romantic gesture before the movie's over, type thing. Like, we've seen it over and over and over again.
Well, thank you again, sir. I always appreciate it. It's good to talk to you. Please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your audio pods. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We just went over 33,000 subscribers. So thank you for that. Tremendous. And please don't ever think I take it for granted. I definitely do not. RJ, you have a great Thursday, my friend.
I'll think about it.